It happened the day I gave Stephanie our family home, the same house my late husband and I built with love and dreams. She smiled, thanked me, and within hours told me I'd be moving into the cold, unfinished basement, just while renovations happened, she said. That night, I lay awake on a musty old sofa, hearing her laugh upstairs with her friends, calling me dead weight through the vents. The next morning, when I tried to leave, I found the basement door locked from the outside. I stood there, hand trembling on the knob, heart breaking, realizing I wasn't just unwanted. I was a prisoner in my own home. But Stephanie didn't know I still held a secret she had overlooked, something hidden deep in the old paperwork she was too greedy to bother reading. And once I found it, I knew she was about to lose everything she thought she'd won. But before we begin, dear, comment under this video where in the world you're watching from today. Now let's start from the beginning. I never thought my own daughter would be capable of such cruelty. Not Stephanie. Not my only child whom I'd rocked through fevers, cheered at graduations, and comforted through her divorce. But life has a way of teaching you that the people you think you know best can become strangers in an instant. My husband Robert and I had purchased our 2-story colonial back in 1975, just 3 months before Stephanie was born. The house wasn't much then. Peeling wallpaper in the kitchen, floors that creaked like old bones, and a backyard more dirt than grass. But Robert would squeeze my hand and whisper, "This is our kingdom, Ellie. Just you wait and see." And he was right. For 45 years, that house held every important moment of our lives. The pencil marks tracking Stephanie's height on the kitchen door frame, the dent in the living room wall from when Robert tried to carry in our new sofa without help, the garden I'd coaxed from stubborn clay soil into a rainbow of perennials that bloomed faithfully each spring. After Robert died, heart attack sudden and cruel at 68, I rattled around those rooms like the last pea in a can. Too many memories, too much silence. When Stephanie suggested I might be happier in a smaller place, I initially bristled. Leave my home? The thought felt like betrayal. But as the months wore on, I began to see wisdom in change. The stairs were getting harder on my knees. The property taxes kept rising. And wouldn't Robert want his legacy to continue through our daughter? "Mom, think about it," Stephanie had said over Sunday dinner, her manicured hand resting on mine. "You're 70 now. The house is too much for you. If you sign it over to me, you'll never have to worry about maintenance again. You can stay in your home forever, and I'll take care of everything." Her words wrapped around me like a warm blanket. What greater gift could there be than securing my daughter's future while honoring Robert's memory? The family home would stay in the family. Our grandchildren would grow up knowing their grandfather's rose bushes, their grandmother's kitchen. "You're sure about this, Steffi?" I'd asked, using her childhood nickname. "It's a big responsibility." "More than sure," she'd answered, her blue eyes, so like her father's, glistening with what I mistook for gratitude. "It's the perfect solution for both of us." The day we signed the papers at the attorney's office, Stephanie wore a cream-colored suit that made her look like a movie star. I felt dowdy beside her in my sensible navy dress, but proud too. My beautiful, successful daughter. What mother wouldn't want to give her the world? "All done," the attorney said, sliding the papers into a folder. "Congratulations, Ms. Bennett. The house is now legally yours." Stephanie's smile stretched wide. Too wide, I realize now. We drove home, my home, now hers, in separate cars. I followed her sleek silver BMW in my aging Toyota, rehearsing the speech I'd prepared about how this transfer didn't change anything, how I'd still make Sunday dinners and tend my garden. But as we stepped through the front door, Stephanie's demeanor shifted. Her shoulders straightened, her smile thinned. "Mom," she said, not quite meeting my eyes, "I've been thinking about the sleeping arrangements." My heart gave a little stutter. "What do you mean?" "I have my bedroom upstairs." "Actually, I think it would be best if you took the basement apartment, just temporarily," she added quickly, "while I renovate the upstairs." "Basement apartment?" We had a partially finished basement with a bathroom Robert had installed years ago, but it was cold and damp, with concrete floors and exposed pipes. I used it mainly for storage. "The basement?" My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. "But Steffi, all my things are upstairs. My bedroom—" "I'll help you move what you need," she interrupted, already walking toward the stairs. "The rest we can put in storage. Or donate. You really have accumulated too much over the years, Mom." I stood frozen in the entryway, my purse still clutched in my hand. This wasn't what we'd discussed. This wasn't what I'd envisioned at all. But I've never been one for confrontation. Robert used to tease that I'd apologize to someone who stepped on my foot. So I followed Stephanie downstairs, a sick feeling spreading through my stomach as she pointed out where I could put a bed, how the old storage shelves could be repurposed for my clothes. "It's just temporary," I whispered to myself as I carried down armfuls of my belongings later that afternoon. "Just a misunderstanding. She'll come to her senses." That evening, as I lay on the musty pull-out sofa that now served as my bed, I heard voices upstairs. Stephanie's laugh, bright and tinkling, followed by another woman's voice I recognized as her friend Melissa. "God, it feels so good to finally have this place to myself," Stephanie was saying, her voice carrying through the heating vent. "I've been waiting years for this." "What about your mom?" Melissa asked. There was a pause, then Stephanie's voice again, lower but still audible. "She's fine in the basement. Honestly, it's a relief to have her out of the way. She was becoming such dead weight, always hovering, always there. Now we're finally rid of her upstairs presence, and I can start making real changes." Dead weight. The words pierced me like physical blows. Rid of her. I pressed my hand against my mouth to stifle a sob. This was my daughter speaking, the baby I'd nursed, the child I'd raised, the woman I'd just gifted my most precious possession. I barely slept that night, my mind cycling through confusion, hurt, and disbelief. By morning, I'd convinced myself I needed to speak with Stephanie directly, clear the air. Surely she didn't mean what she'd said. I dressed carefully in slacks and a sweater, applied a touch of lipstick for courage, and climbed the basement stairs. When I reached the top, I turned the knob. It didn't move. I tried again, jiggling it slightly, thinking it might be stuck. Nothing. With a jolt of fear, I realized the truth. The door was locked from the other side. "Stephanie," I called, my voice trembling. "The door seems to be locked." Silence answered me. "Stephanie," I called louder, knocking now. "Can you open the door, please?" More silence, heavy and deliberate. An icy wave crashed over me as understanding dawned. This was no accident, no temporary arrangement, no misunderstanding. I was a prisoner in my own home, the home I had lovingly tended for decades, the home I had foolishly signed away. My legs gave way beneath me, and I sank down onto the top step, a hand pressed against my thundering heart. How could I have been so blind, so trusting, so stupid? In that moment, staring at the locked door that separated me from my former life, I understood with horrifying clarity what had happened. My daughter had betrayed me, and I had handed her the keys to do it. I never thought I'd be counting the days of my imprisonment in my own home, but that's exactly what I found myself doing. The first week, I made little marks on the concrete wall with a pencil stub I found. By the second week, I stopped. What was the point? The days blurred together in a haze of cold and hunger. The basement temperature dropped as autumn deepened. I wrapped myself in every piece of clothing I could layer, but nothing kept out the bone-deep chill that seemed to rise from the concrete floor. One morning, shivering so hard my teeth chattered, I crept up the stairs and pressed my ear against the door. "Stephanie," I called out, my voice cracking. "The basement is freezing. Could you please turn up the heat a little?" I heard footsteps approach, then stop on the other side. "I've adjusted the zones," she said coolly. "The basement thermostat is disconnected. It's an unnecessary expense to heat unused space." Unused space. Is that what I'd become? "But I'm down here," I said, hating the pleading note in my voice. "I can see my breath, Steffi." "There are blankets in the storage boxes," she replied. "And stop calling me Steffi. It's childish." The footsteps retreated and I slid down the door, hugging my knees to my chest, my own daughter, my little girl who once crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, now treating me like an unwanted pet. Meals became another form of humiliation. In the beginning, Stephanie would bring down a plate at mealtimes, leftovers mostly, but at least they were regular. Then the schedule became erratic. Sometimes food wouldn't appear until late evening. Other times I'd hear her scrape what sounded like perfectly good food into the garbage disposal, rather than offer it to me. "I forgot you were down here," she'd say with a shrug when she finally brought down a plate of cold pasta or half a sandwich. She'd set it on the bottom step like I was a stray animal she was reluctantly feeding. The worst part was knowing people were in my home, hearing voices, laughter, the clink of glasses, while I sat alone in the dimness. Occasionally, I'd recognize neighbors' voices, people I'd known for decades. "Mom's having some cognitive issues," I overheard Stephanie telling Mrs. Abernathy one afternoon. "The doctors say it's best if she has a controlled environment. Some days she doesn't even know where she is." My hands trembled with rage and helplessness. Lies, all lies. But who would believe me over my successful, charming daughter? Who would imagine she'd locked her own mother away? My only lifeline was Harold. Dear, steady Harold, who'd been Robert's best friend since college, who'd helped us move into this very house 45 years ago. He started coming by weekly, ostensibly to check on house maintenance issues for Stephanie. Every Tuesday at precisely 2 p.m., he'd appear at the basement door with a small bag of groceries, fresh fruit, nuts, chocolate. He remembered my sweet tooth, and sometimes a paperback novel. "Stephanie says you're confused," he said during his second visit, his bushy eyebrows drawn together in concern. "Says you think she's mistreating you." "She's lying, Harold," I whispered, terrified Stephanie might overhear. "She locked me down here the day I signed over the house." He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded almost imperceptibly. From then on, his visits became my salvation, not just for the food and supplies, but for the dignity of being believed. 6 weeks into my basement exile came the breaking point. It had rained for days, and water was seeping through the foundation walls. My makeshift bed was damp, my few clothes musty. I'd developed a persistent cough that rattled my chest with each breath. When Harold appeared that Tuesday, I barely had the strength to greet him. "Martha," he said, setting down his grocery bag and taking my cold hands in his warm ones. "You're sick." Something in his gentle concern cracked the dam I'd built around my emotions. Tears spilled down my cheeks, then sobs tore from my throat, great heaving cries that seemed to come from the depths of my soul. I gave her everything, I wept, not caring anymore who might hear. The house, the memories, all of it. No conditions, no protections, nothing. I trusted her completely. Harold's arm came around my shoulders, steady and strong. "I'm such a fool," I continued, wiping my nose with the back of my hand. "I thought I was securing our bond, our future. Instead, I signed away my freedom, my dignity, everything." "You're not a fool," Harold said firmly. "You're a mother who loved unconditionally. That's never foolish." I looked up at him through swollen eyes. "But what do I do now? I have nothing left. No rights to this house, no savings, nothing." Harold's weathered face hardened, a look I'd rarely seen on his usually gentle features. "Martha, there's something you need to know," he said, lowering his voice. "I overheard Stephanie on the phone yesterday when I arrived early. She's planning to sell the house." My heart seemed to stop. "Sell it, but—" "To a developer. They're closing in 30 days. His eyes held mine steadily. "She's making arrangements to move you to some facility in Oregon. Said it would be easier for everyone if you were far away when the sale goes through." The room seemed to tilt around me. Sell our home, ship me across the country. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that it transcended tears. "She can't," I whispered, but even as I said it, I knew she could. Legally, there was nothing stopping her. "Actually," Harold said, a strange note entering his voice, "I think there might be something we can do, but you'll need to be brave, Martha, braver than you've ever been." I straightened my shoulders, feeling something shift inside me, something hard and determined where once there had been only hurt. "Tell me," I said. I watched Harold leave, his warning still ringing in my ears. 30 days until I'd lose not just my dignity, but the very walls that had witnessed my life unfold. The thought of being shipped off to Oregon, so far from everything familiar, made my chest tighten with panic. Sleep was impossible that night. Every creak of the house, every distant sound of Stephanie moving around upstairs sent fresh waves of dread through me. Around 9, I heard her laughing on the phone, then the distinct sound of the front door closing. Her car engine started, then faded into the distance. She was gone. For how long, I couldn't be sure. I sat up on my damp mattress, heart pounding. This might be my only chance. With trembling legs, I made my way to the corner where I'd stacked the few boxes Stephanie had generously allowed me to keep, mostly old photo albums and keepsakes she deemed worthless. "Think, Martha," I whispered to myself. "Think." Robert had always been so meticulous about paperwork. Even as his health failed, he'd insisted I know where every important document was kept. Had I managed to save any of it? I opened the first box, rifling through old Christmas cards and faded photographs. Nothing. The second box held Robert's bowling trophies and a few of his favorite books. Still nothing. By the third box, desperation was setting in. My fingers moved frantically through stacks of photo albums, each one filled with smiling faces from happier times. I was about to close it when something slipped from between the pages of our oldest album, the one with our wedding photos. A folded document, yellowed with age. With shaking hands, I unfolded it, squinting in the dim basement light. It was a copy of the original deed to our house, dated 1978. Robert had tucked it away for safekeeping all those years ago. I scanned the dense legal text, my eyes struggling to focus. Most of it was standard language, property boundaries, rights of way, but then near the bottom, a paragraph caught my attention. Any future sale, transfer, or substantial alteration of said property following the initial transfer to heirs requires written consent of all living original deed holders. I read it again and again. Could it be? When we'd updated our will years ago, making Stephanie our heir, this clause would have remained. Even after signing over the house, could I still have rights? I clutched the paper to my chest, hardly daring to hope. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than despair, a tiny flicker of possibility. I barely slept that night, the precious document tucked under my pillow. The moment I heard Harold's familiar knock the next morning, I was at the door. "I found something," I blurted out before he could even say hello. I thrust the deed into his hands. "Look at the clause about future sales." Harold's eyes widened as he read. He looked up at me, then back at the document. "Martha, this could be significant," he said slowly, cautiously. "If this clause was never explicitly removed when you transferred ownership to Stephanie, then she can't sell without my consent," I finished, my voice barely above a whisper. "Potentially," Harold nodded, "but we need to be certain. This is an old copy, and we need to verify if this clause survived in the current deed." "How do we do that?" "We need a real estate attorney, someone specialized who knows these intricacies." Harold pulled out his phone. "I know someone, Jeremy Patel. He handled some complicated property issues for me years ago." "Can we call him now?" I asked, glancing nervously at the ceiling. "Stephanie went out last night, but I don't know when she'll be back." Harold was already dialing. After a brief conversation, he handed me the phone. "He wants to hear directly from you." My fingers trembled as I took the phone. "Hello?" "Mrs. Miller, this is Jeremy Patel. Harold tells me you're in a difficult situation." I explained everything, the transfer of the deed, my current circumstances, and the clause I'd discovered. My voice shook at times, but I pushed through. "That clause is very interesting," Jeremy said when I finished. "If it was never explicitly removed during the transfer, it could indeed still be binding. I'll need to check the county records immediately." "How long will that take?" I asked, thinking of Stephanie's 30-day timeline. "I can start today. In fact, I'll head to the records office as soon as we hang up." Above me, I heard the front door open. Stephanie's laughter filtered down. She must have brought someone home with her. "She's back," I whispered, my heart racing. "Stay calm," Jeremy advised. "Don't let her know what we're doing. If this clause is still valid, we can stop her plans cold, but we need to move quickly and quietly." After hanging up, I slipped the deed back into the photo album just as Stephanie's footsteps crossed overhead. Her voice drifted down, carefree and light. "The realtor says we can list by next week. It'll be such a relief to finally unload this place." I exchanged glances with Harold, a new determination hardening in my chest. For weeks I'd been a victim, powerless and broken. But now, with that forgotten clause and Harold by my side, I had something I'd thought lost forever: hope. Still, as Harold prepared to leave, promising to return with news from Jeremy, a nagging worry gnawed at me. 30 days wasn't much time. The legal system moved slowly. What if Jeremy couldn't confirm the clause in time? What if Stephanie somehow found out what we were doing? Will we be fast enough? I whispered to Harold at the door. He squeezed my hand. We'll do everything possible, Martha. Everything possible. As the door closed behind him, I clutched the photo album to my chest, the precious deed hidden inside. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to imagine a future where justice might prevail. The days that followed were the longest of my life. Every creak in the floorboards above made me flinch. Every slam of a door sent my heart racing. I'd check my old flip phone constantly, willing it to ring with news from Jeremy. These things take time, Harold reminded me during his visits. Jeremy's filing all the right paperwork, but legal wheels turn slowly. Time is exactly what we don't have, I whispered back. Meanwhile, Stephanie's footsteps overhead became more agitated, her phone calls more frequent and tense. Twice she came downstairs, supposedly to bring me food, but her eyes darted around suspiciously, as if searching for evidence of something. She'd never paid this much attention to me before. "You've been talking to someone," she accused on the third day, dropping a plate of cold leftovers on my makeshift table. "Just Harold," I answered truthfully, keeping my voice neutral. "He checks on me." She narrowed her eyes. "What do you two talk about?" I met her gaze steadily. The weather, his garden, old times. "Well, tell him not to come so often. It's disruptive." She turned to leave, then paused. "And Mom? If you're thinking of causing problems, remember who controls your situation." The threat hung in the air long after she'd gone back upstairs. That night, I barely slept. What if Jeremy couldn't find proof the clause was still valid? What if Stephanie discovered what we were doing before we could stop her? I clutched my pillow, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios until dawn crept through the tiny basement window. Harold called the next afternoon with an update. "Jeremy found the original clause in the current deed," he said, his voice low but excited. "It was never removed during the transfer. He's filing a notice with the county today that will effectively block any sale without your written consent." Relief washed over me like a warm tide. "So she can't sell?" "Not without your signature, which I'm guessing she won't be getting," Harold chuckled. "How long until she finds out?" "Soon, very soon." Harold was right. The next morning, exactly 1 week after we'd discovered the clause, I was folding my meager laundry when the basement door flew open with such force it slammed against the wall. Stephanie stood at the top of the stairs, her face contorted with rage. She stormed down, waving her phone in my face. "What did you do?" she demanded, her voice shaking. I set down the shirt I was folding. "Good morning to you too, Stephanie." "Don't play innocent. My buyer just backed out. Said there's some legal issue with the deed requiring your consent for any sale." She leaned in close, her breath hot on my face. "How did you know?" "Who have you been talking to?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The perfectly styled hair, the expensive blouse, the manicured nails pointing accusingly at me. When had she become this person? This stranger who saw me as nothing but an inconvenience? "I lived in this house for 47 years, I said quietly. "Did you really think I wouldn't remember the terms of my own deed?" Her face flushed crimson. "You can't do this to me. I have plans, commitments. The sale of this house is already factored into my business expansion." "Just like my moving to the basement was temporary?" I asked. "That's different," she sputtered. "Is it? You lied to me, Stephanie. You planned to sell my home, our family home, and throw me out with nowhere to go." I would have given you some money. Money isn't the point, I interrupted, surprising myself with my steadiness. This was about respect, about family, about promises. She paced the small room, running her hands through her hair. You have to sign off on the sale. You have to. I simply looked at her, saying nothing. Mom, please. Her tone shifted suddenly, almost pleading. This is a huge opportunity for me. I can't lose it. Amazing how quickly the anger transformed to manipulation when she realized I held power. I'd seen this pattern my entire life with Stephanie, but never so nakedly displayed. I need time to think, I said finally. There isn't time. I need your signature today. I folded my arms. Then I guess you have a problem. Her face hardened again. You'll regret this, she hissed before storming back upstairs, slamming the door behind her. That evening, I pressed my ear to the heating vent that connected to the living room above. Stephanie's voice drifted down, tense and desperate. Yes, I understand it's last minute, but circumstances have changed. No, the house is still available, just there's a slight delay in paperwork. Hello? Hello? A frustrated groan, then the sound of dialing again. Marcus, it's Stephanie again. Please call me back. The investment opportunity is still solid. I just need a little more time. The rumors you've heard aren't accurate. I can explain everything. Another call, another desperate plea. I could hear the panic rising in her voice with each unanswered call. The rumor mill was turning. In our small community, news traveled fast. I knew from decades of living here that once whispers started, they were almost impossible to stop. Stephanie was discovering this hard truth now, as her carefully constructed plans began unraveling thread by thread. I sat back on my cot, a strange calm settling over me. For the first time since moving to this basement, I didn't feel powerless. I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like myself again. I spent the next morning sitting on my cot, staring at the small window that let in just enough light to remind me the world still existed outside these basement walls. The sounds from upstairs had changed. The confident click of Stephanie's heels had been replaced by frantic pacing, and her usually measured phone voice had taken on a desperate edge. It started with one cancellation. I heard it clearly through the vent, a client backing out of a major redesign project. By lunchtime, there had been 3 more. No, Mrs. Thornberry, that's completely untrue, Stephanie had pleaded into her phone. My mother is living with me by choice. Yes, in the house. Well, she prefers the basement, actually. It's cooler in the summer. Even from below, I could hear how hollow the lies sounded. By the second day, Harold arrived for his regular visit with a gleam in his eye I hadn't seen since before my husband passed. You won't believe what's happening, he said, setting down a bag of groceries and lowering himself onto the folding chair beside me. The whole town is talking. About what? I asked, though I already knew. About Stephanie, about what she did to you. He leaned forward, his voice dropping conspiratorially. Marjorie at the salon refused to take her appointment yesterday, said she couldn't in good conscience style the hair of someone who'd locked their own mother in a basement. My chest tightened. I never told anyone she locked me in. You didn't have to. Harold's eyes crinkled. People aren't blind, Margaret. They've seen your car parked here for months while you never leave the house. They've watched Stephanie coming and going, throwing parties upstairs while you're nowhere to be seen. Folks put 2 and 2 together. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around myself. I never wanted to humiliate her. No, Harold said gently. You just wanted justice. There's a difference. He was right, of course, but it didn't stop the complicated tangle of emotions, satisfaction twisted with maternal guilt, from knotting in my stomach. The Henderson renovation just fell through, Harold continued. They called her this morning and canceled the entire project. That's $20,000 at least. How do you know all this? I asked. He shrugged. Small town. Plus, I may have run into Janet Henderson at the hardware store yesterday and mentioned how concerned I was about you. I should have been horrified at the gossip. Instead, I felt a strange, quiet vindication washing over me. For weeks, I'd been the one hidden away, ashamed, as if my very existence was something to be concealed. Now the shame had found its rightful owner. Her interior design showcase next month. 3 of the 5 featured homeowners have pulled out. Harold looked positively delighted. Her business is hemorrhaging money faster than a burst pipe. Harold, I admonished, though my heart wasn't in it. What? I'm just keeping you informed. He patted my hand. She made her bed with Egyptian cotton sheets that cost more than my monthly pension. Now she can lie in it. That evening, the basement door opened again. This time there was no angry slam, no dramatic entrance. Stephanie descended the stairs slowly, her usual perfect appearance in disarray. Her mascara had smudged beneath red-rimmed eyes, and her silk blouse was wrinkled, as if she'd been hugging herself too tightly. "Mom," she said, her voice small and broken. "Everything's falling apart." I set aside the book I'd been pretending to read. I heard. She sank onto the edge of my cot, her shoulders slumped in defeat. "They're all canceling. Everyone. Projects I've been working on for months. The Henderson renovation would have been featured in Home and Style magazine." Her voice cracked. "I was going to be on the cover." "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. I'd never wanted to destroy her career, just to reclaim my dignity. "Please," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You have to help me fix this. Tell everyone it was a misunderstanding, that I've been taking care of you, that you wanted to be down here." The old instinct surged through me, the maternal reflex to smooth things over, to sacrifice my own needs for my child's happiness. For a moment, I almost gave in. Almost. But then I remembered the cold nights, the meals tossed down like scraps, the laughter upstairs as she called me dead weight. "I can't lie for you, Stephanie," I said quietly. "Mom, please," she begged, grabbing my hands. "I'll lose everything. My business, my reputation, everything I've worked for." "And what about what I lost?" I asked. "My home, my dignity, my daughter's respect?" Her sobs grew louder, more desperate. "I made a mistake. I was wrong." "Is that what you want to hear?" "What I want," I said carefully, "is for you to understand what you did. Really understand." "I do understand, and I'm sorry." She clutched at my sleeve like a drowning woman. "Just tell me what to do to make this right. I'll do anything." I looked at my daughter, this stranger wearing my child's face, and felt the weight of decades of enabling her selfish behavior. Each time I'd excused her actions, each boundary I'd allowed her to cross, had led us here. "Some things can't be fixed with words," I said finally. Her desperate cries faded into hollow sobs as she realized I wouldn't rescue her this time. Eventually, she dragged herself back upstairs, leaving me alone with my thoughts. In the quiet that followed, I made my decision. Tomorrow I would take the final step Harold had suggested. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth doing ever is. I barely slept that night. The memory of Stephanie's sobs echoed in my mind, competing with the remembered sound of her laughter as she called me dead weight. My heart felt like a battlefield where maternal love clashed with the need for justice. By morning, I knew exactly what I had to do. Harold arrived at 8 sharp, as promised, a manila envelope tucked under his arm. The sight of his weathered face brought an unexpected calm over me. "You sure about this?" he asked, his kind eyes searching mine. There was no judgment there, just concern, the genuine kind I hadn't felt from my own daughter in years. I nodded, taking the envelope from him. The paper felt heavy in my hands, heavier than its actual weight. I've never been more sure of anything. My fingers traced the sealed edge, feeling the weight of what lay inside. "Want me to come with you?" Harold shifted his weight, ready to stand beside me if needed. "No," I said, squaring my shoulders. "This is something I need to do myself." Some battles you just have to face alone, even when you're 73 and your knees protest every step. I climbed the basement stairs one slow step at a time, my knees protesting but my resolve firm. Each creak of the old wood seemed to echo my determination. The house above, my house, was quiet. I found Stephanie in the kitchen, hunched over her laptop, frantically typing emails to salvage what remained of her business. Her manicured nails clicked against the keyboard like tiny hammers. She didn't look up when I entered. "Stephanie," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. Was this really me speaking with such confidence? She glanced up, irritation flashing across her face. Her perfectly styled hair fell across one eye, which she brushed away impatiently. "Mom, I can't talk right now. I'm trying to fix the mess you've—" I placed the envelope on the table in front of her, cutting off her words. It landed with a soft thud that somehow seemed to fill the entire kitchen. "What's this?" she asked, eyeing it suspiciously. Her hand hovered over it as if it might bite. "It's an eviction notice," I said simply. "You have 48 hours to vacate the premises." The legal terminology felt strange on my tongue, but also empowering. Her face went blank with shock, then twisted in disbelief. First came the widening of her eyes, then the slight parting of her lips, and finally that familiar furrow between her brows. "You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious in my life." My hand trembled slightly as I stood there, but my heart remained steady. This wasn't about revenge. This was about reclaiming what was mine, not just the house, but my dignity. Stephanie snatched up the envelope, tearing it open. Her eyes darted back and forth across the page, reading and rereading the legal language as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less devastating. The color drained from her face, then rushed back in a furious flush. "This is ridiculous," she sputtered, waving the paper in the air. "You can't evict me from my own house." Spittle flew from her mouth, landing on the polished granite countertop she'd insisted on installing last year. "It's not your house," I said quietly. The transfer of deed was incomplete without proper consideration. The court has recognized my claim as the rightful owner. I'd practiced these words all morning, determined not to stumble. Harold had explained it all to me. Because I'd received nothing in return for the property, no money, no care agreement, nothing, the gift could be legally challenged, and we had challenged it successfully. The justice of it warmed me from the inside out. "I'll fight this," she threatened, her voice rising to a pitch that used to make me wince and apologize. "I'll get lawyers. I'll tie this up in court for years." I shook my head. "Harold made sure the case was airtight. The judge has already signed the order." Amazing how calm I felt saying those words, like I'd been standing up for myself my entire life, instead of just starting now. Her face flushed red with anger. "Harold? You're taking legal advice from a retired real estate lawyer who spends his days feeding pigeons in the park?" She snorted, that dismissive sound I'd heard directed at so many people she considered beneath her. "That retired real estate lawyer specialized in elder law for 40 years, I said, "and he's been a better friend to me than my own daughter." The words tasted bitter but necessary, like medicine. The truth of those words hung in the air between us. Stephanie's eyes filled with tears, not the manipulative ones she'd used last night, but genuine tears of realization. For a moment, I glimpsed the little girl who used to run to me with skinned knees, looking for comfort. But that girl was long gone. 48 hours, I repeated, turning to leave. My back felt straighter than it had in months. "Mom, wait." I paused at the doorway but didn't turn around. The refrigerator hummed in the silence. "Where am I supposed to go?" Her voice had lost its edge, sounding small and uncertain. The vulnerability in it tugged at my heart. Wasn't that always her most effective weapon? "That's not my problem anymore," I said, and walked away. Each step felt like breaking an invisible chain. The next 2 days were chaos. Stephanie stomped through the house, throwing clothes into suitcases, slamming drawers and making phone calls to friends who suddenly couldn't offer her a place to stay. Her reputation had preceded her. I could hear the desperation creeping into her voice with each call, the forced cheerfulness crumbling into barely concealed panic. I stayed mostly in the kitchen, reclaiming my space inch by inch. I wiped down counters that had gathered dust in my absence. I reorganized cabinets that had been rearranged. With each small act, I felt myself returning to the home I'd loved. I ran my fingers over the worn edge of the counter where I'd prepared thousands of family meals, reconnecting with the memories embedded in every scratch. But it wasn't easy. Every crash from upstairs sent a pang through my heart. Was I being too harsh? Was there another way? Then I'd remember the cold basement floor, the meals tossed down like scraps, and my resolve would strengthen again. The dull ache of betrayal was still fresh enough to override decades of maternal instinct. On the final morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching through the window as Stephanie dragged her suitcases down the driveway. The morning light caught in her hair, making it glow like it had in her childhood photos. She'd called a taxi rather than ask any of her former friends for a ride. She looked smaller somehow, diminished without the power she'd wielded over me. Her designer clothes hung on her frame as if they belonged to someone else. Her carefully styled hair had lost its perfect shape. The confident stride I'd always envied had shrunk to uncertain steps. As she reached the end of the driveway, she turned back, casting one last devastated look at the house she once thought she owned completely. Our eyes met through the window glass, and I saw something I'd never expected: recognition. For perhaps the first time, she was seeing me as a person, not just as her mother. The realization seemed to age her right before my eyes. I sipped my coffee and slowly closed the curtain, refusing to meet her gaze any longer. I heard the taxi door slam, the engine start, the sound of tires on gravel fading away. Was that relief I felt, or heartbreak? Perhaps both could exist in the same moment. The front door closed softly behind her, and in that moment, I felt the weight of the past slowly lifting from my shoulders. The house creaked and settled around me, as if sighing with relief. I was home again. Finally, truly home. I stood in the center of the living room the day after Stephanie left, breathing in the emptiness. The house felt different already, lighter somehow, as if her anger and resentment had been physical things taking up space. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to truly look at what had become of my home. Stephanie had rearranged everything to suit her taste. My comfortable old sofa had been pushed against the wall to make room for a sleek glass coffee table I'd never seen before. The family photos I'd carefully arranged on the mantel had been replaced with abstract art pieces that meant nothing to me. Even the curtains were different, sheer, impractical things that let in too much light. "Well," I said aloud to the empty room, "this won't do at all." I started small. That first day, I just moved the sofa back to where it had always been, angled toward the fireplace, creating the cozy corner where Frank and I had spent countless evenings. My knees protested as I pushed, but I refused to stop until it was exactly right. When I finally sat down in my spot, running my hands over the familiar fabric, tears sprang to my eyes. "I'm back, Frank," I whispered. "I'm taking our home back." Over the next few days, Harold helped me carry Stephanie's modern furniture to the curb with a free sign. He offered to help me redecorate, but this was something I needed to do myself. Room by room, I reclaimed my space. In the dining room, I unwrapped my grandmother's china that had been boxed up in the basement. Each piece I carefully washed and returned to the hutch felt like greeting an old friend. The wedding gift from Frank's parents, a crystal vase we'd only used on special occasions, caught the afternoon light and scattered rainbows across the wall. "Look at that," I said, turning the vase slowly. "Still beautiful after all these years." The master bedroom was the hardest. Stephanie had taken over completely, replacing my comfortable quilt with a stark white duvet, my reading lamp with some artsy contraption that barely gave enough light to see by. I stripped the bed with shaking hands, bundling her expensive sheets into a donation bag. From the cedar chest at the foot of the bed, I pulled out the quilt my mother had made for my wedding day. The colors had faded slightly over the decades, but the careful stitching remained perfect. As I spread it across the bed, smoothing the wrinkles with my palm, I could almost hear my mother's voice. "A home should comfort you, not impress your neighbors." How right she had been. The photographs were next. I spent an entire afternoon arranging them on the mantel again. Frank in his Navy uniform, Stephanie on her first day of kindergarten, my parents on their 50th anniversary. I hesitated over a recent photo of Stephanie at some business award ceremony. Her smile looked so much like Frank's. After a moment's consideration, I placed it alongside the others. She was still my daughter, despite everything. "The past is the past," I told Harold when he questioned me about it. "I'm not erasing her from my life. I'm just not letting her control it anymore." As the weeks passed, the house transformed back into my sanctuary. I planted geraniums in the window boxes and hung wind chimes on the porch. I scrubbed the basement until no trace remained of my humiliation there. Each act of restoration healed something inside me. I established new rituals. Every morning I carried Frank's favorite mug, the chipped blue one with "World's Best Husband," faded from years of washing, out to the porch with my coffee. I'd watch the sunrise, feeling the day's possibilities unfold before me. The quiet that had once felt so suffocating now wrapped around me like a comfortable blanket. Sometimes neighbors stopped by, curious about what had happened with Stephanie. I kept my explanation simple. We had a disagreement about the house. She's moved on to other opportunities. No need to air our dirty laundry. Besides, most of them had already heard the rumors. Mrs. Peterson from next door brought me a casserole one evening. "I should have checked on you sooner," she said, her eyes downcast. "Stephanie told us you weren't well, that you needed privacy." I patted her hand. "It's all right. I'm well now." And I was, better than I'd been in years, actually, without the constant worry of disappointing Stephanie, of measuring up to her expectations. I found myself sleeping through the night. The arthritis in my hands even seemed less painful. Of course, I thought about Stephanie. How could I not? Harold heard she'd moved to another city, taken a job with a smaller design firm. Sometimes at night I'd find myself wondering if she had enough to eat, if she'd found a decent place to live. Maternal instincts don't just disappear, even after betrayal. But I refused to let guilt creep back in. I had spent too many years putting everyone else first. Frank, Stephanie, the endless parade of PTA meetings and neighborhood committees. This chapter was mine. "You fought for yourself," Harold reminded me over tea one afternoon. "There's no shame in that." He was right. I hadn't acted out of anger or revenge, though God knows I'd had reason enough. I'd fought out of love, for Frank's memory, for the life we'd built together brick by brick, and for the dignity that no betrayal could ever fully steal from me. This morning, like every morning now, I carried Frank's mug out to the porch and settled into the wicker chair. The sun was just beginning to peek over Mrs. Peterson's maple tree, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A gentle breeze carried the scent of my blooming roses. I smiled into the sunrise, feeling the warmth on my face. Finally, unmistakably, at peace. If you enjoyed this story, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.